Hey, welcome to my channel. I'm Amber, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my weekly reading wrap-up. So this week was a bit of a weird struggle of a week for me because at the very beginning of this week, I finished a book in one day, and I was like, okay, so we're just going to keep on going, right? And it goes right through. Nope. I started a book, I read like 100 pages of it, and then I kept on not being able to pick it up until the very end of the week where I just finished the last 260 pages of it. And like I had picked up another book because I thought maybe the topic of that book was just causing me to like not be able to read it, to continue reading. So I went to another book and that one was just not working for me. So yeah, it was just like a bit of a weird week, and I was really worried that I was gonna have another reading slump. Like I've been trying not to be so worried about it because I've noticed I've learned a lot about myself this past 2 years when it comes to reading. Especially this year as I've been keeping more of track of like how my reading has gone, like keeping track of what I've read, my ratings and all of that. Like it goes to show that like when I'm not forcing myself to read, and I'm not like worrying over being in a slump. Like if you're just not wanting to read, you're just not wanting to read. I don't know why I keep calling it a reading slump because it's really not a reading slump. It's just a time in your life where you're just not able to read. It's like it's not a big deal. We need to stop putting too much pressure on ourselves in that way. But yeah, like when I noticed that I had stopped worrying so much about, oh my gosh, I'm not reading, why am I not reading, and like trying to force myself to read, I was actually enjoying my reading experience when I was wanting to read a whole lot better. And I noticed that the number of books I was reading was a lot higher than it normally would be if I was trying to force myself to read when I wasn't wanting to read. So I just noticed, and I'm trying not to like put myself into a panic over not reading. A lot of the reason is because I am so close to finishing my reading goal, so I was a little bit worried because I'm like, okay, I am like right there. Also, I have a lot of books from the library that I need to read, which is also another thing that I was worried. I'm like, I don't want to return these books not read. So it was just a little worrying in that sense, but especially with the library book situation. But I'm trying to be like, okay, I can always borrow these books again. Don't put so much pressure on yourself because we know what happens, right? So I don't think I'm in a reading slump. I think I just had like a moment of like reading frustration and all of that. So thankfully, I did finish my second book this week. As we may have gathered, I think I've been reading like 3 books a week so far. So it was just like, oh no. Anyways, I gotta go take my dog out. Okay, I wanted to talk about my dog. She's a family dog, and the rest of my family is off at work, so she's barking at their door to like go into their bedroom because she thinks they're there. Our dog, I think, is starting to have dementia and is starting to forget certain things. Because you know how dogs are, they know routines, they learn like times and stuff. But I think she's been forgetting that they go to work at this time, and so she gets really upset when she can't find them. But anyways, back on to reading. Like I said, I did finish 2 books this week. So the first book I finished was Written in the Stars by Alexandria Bellefore. This is about Darcy and Elle, who are set up on a blind date with each other by Darcy's brother, who is also Elle's business partner. And the date goes horribly wrong. It was a bit of a disaster. And when Darcy's brother asks her how it went, she lies and tells him that it went well. And then, of course, Elle finds out, confronts Darcy, and Darcy like begs her to play along, and she reluctantly agrees to do so as long as if she's helping her, she'll help her, help Elle with her family during Thanksgiving, and that it will end at New Year's Eve. So, yeah, that's the basics of the story. It reminds me a lot of those Hallmark holiday movies where like the protagonist of those movies are like tired of their family like harping on them and don't want to go home without a date because they're just tired of them doing that. So they bring somebody home that to fake date with just as a fake date thing, and then they end up falling in love. It kind of reminds me a lot of that, except make it sapphic. So overall, I really enjoyed their romance, the chemistry between these two, and just wanting to find out how the story was going to end. I really enjoyed that part. But there is a very glaring, very loud issue with this book that nobody seems to be talking about. I looked at Goodreads to see if anybody had brought this up, but nobody has brought it up, and I find that very just frustrating, because I think it is an issue that needs to be talked about, and it's the fact that she puts in a lot of Harry Potter references, and we all know at this point, everybody should know that the author of that work is transphobic and has caused and is probably still causing harm to the community. And this is what I've been learning a lot, is that when you are promoting someone's work, when you're talking about it on your social media, in your books, etc., you are promoting that person's work, and you are driving people to go and buy their stuff. And as long as she continues to profit, continues to get her money, she's not going to change her actions. She has to realize, and the only way that she's going to realize that she's not going to profit from hate is if people stop promoting her stuff and stop buying her stuff. So it's just like frustrating, because I can't imagine that this author does not know what the author of Harry Potter has been up to when it comes to that, especially because this author does seem like she's very into the whole social media stuff, because it plays a pretty big role in the story. It's just, I don't think that she could not have known. So it bothers me. It makes me uncomfortable reading this book, knowing that she is promoting someone who is very transphobic and is causing harm to that community. And also I find it kind of weird, considering that she's writing a queer story, that she would. Is it wrong? Like, am I wrong to like find that weird? Because it's like, you're writing about two queer characters, and yet you're promoting somebody's work that is transphobic. So I don't know, like, about that part. I do think it's very problematic. I do find it an uncomfortable situation to be in, to be reading that, knowing who the author of those books are and everything. And I cannot see that this author isn't standing with transphobia by supporting this author, because I just can't imagine she does not know. I would like to think that I'm wrong about that, but either way, the other thing that kind of like is annoying with this is how heavy-handed the references themselves are. Like, if we ignore the fact, or that issue didn't exist, the fact is that in the first like third of the book, it is very heavy-handed, those references, and it feels very much like she's trying to ride off the coattails of someone else's success, and that she's trying to grab our audiences, that she's trying to get a certain audience, and that she's trying to keep the interest of her readers or something like that. I'm just like, you didn't need those references in order to get an audience. You didn't, or to keep your readers' attention. Like, the story itself was interesting. It was good enough. If someone is a romance reader, they're going to enjoy the story without those references. I just, overall, there's just like a layers of issues here with those references being there. Yeah, I don't know. I just, uncomfortable, problematic. It's a bit of an issue for me. I would have given this like 4.5 stars, but because of that, I did go down to 3 stars. Now I'm thinking I might go a little bit lower, just because I can't imagine that she did not know what she was doing by putting those references in there. So yeah, I would just say that if you're somebody who has been negatively impacted by the author of Harry Potter, and if you know that those references may, be offensive to you in any way or harmful, like, just know that it's in there, and it's a lot, especially the beginning. The next book that I finished was When the Stars Go Dark by Paula Mclean. This one is, I believe this is her first foray into the mystery world. Because I remember her name, and I never thought of her as somebody who would write a mystery, and I was right because I looked that up. She's the one that wrote The Parasite. I think that's the most popular of her books. So anyways, this is about Anna Hart, who is a San Francisco missing person detective, and she's very successful at it, but a tragedy happens in her personal life that causes her to be forced to leave. So she goes back to her hometown, her childhood home, of Mendocino. It's a small village in northern California, and there she's hoping to like start her on her healing journey, to kind of like find some peace and to get away from her job. But instead she finds out that there is a missing girl, and it really like nags at her mind. The girl's name is Cameron. She's 15 years old, and she's been missing for a week at this point when she arrives. And it makes her think a lot about a friend of hers that had gone missing and then found murdered when she was a teenager. And so, yeah, so she gets caught up in this case. I will say that if you like Criminal Minds, as I do, and I love Criminal Minds because they really go into like the psychological aspects of the case, like what the psychological motivations of the murderer or the sub, and the victimology, like what would motivate this person to target this person, all that. And I really enjoyed that aspect. And if you like Criminal Minds as I do, and for the psychological aspects too, I think you'll really enjoy this because it does lean into the psychological aspects of the case here. And overall, like, it took me a bit to get into this, as I've mentioned that I was struggling in the beginning, but once I got into it, it just grabbed me hook, line, and sinker. I found how Anna's past trauma and her present tragedy, how it affected the present case, and how she investigated this missing person, intriguing, but also frustrating, because at times I felt like she went over the line, at times like that she was putting too much of her personal experiences onto Cameron and her situation. It just was a little bit annoying at times, because I'm just like, person, there's just no need for that. Like, you're going too hard on this. Like, and not just because you have similarities between them does not mean that you are the same person, or that you can put so much of yourself onto her in that way. But also, it was just like, I found it so interesting to see where her instincts led her, and I was just like, I'll go wherever you are, even though you're frustrating me and you made mistakes that rightfully that Will, who has let her help on this case, had the right to be angry with her about. Yeah, overall, I just really enjoyed seeing where her instincts led. I will say that this book is set in the early 90s, so you see as when we really get into like the case itself, and she brings in like a real case that happened during that time, the Polly Claus case. It was a real thing, and this is right when the internet was becoming like a big deal, and you're seeing how through that being brought up, and like them talking about how like they wish they could do the same for their case, and how like talking about how the internet is going to like expand the world for them when it comes to investigating missing and murdered crimes, and like how you can like start connecting from like across the country crime labs in that way, and like hopefully like make it harder for criminals to get away with their crime and such. I found that really interesting, but the problem that I had was that unless she talked about something that was specifically like 90s, or like she made a point to point it out that we were in the 90s, I would totally forget that we were in the 90s and thought that we were in the present day. So like it was a little bit jarring at times to be like, oh, and like I had to like remind myself, like, okay, we're in the 90s, remember that. Like, other than like, and like her obsessive need to tell us the type of car that she was driving whenever she got into it. And I'm like, how would I know that that's a car that's a 90s car? Unless I knew about cars. I don't know. So it was just like, it was a little bit frustrating with that aspect too. So, yeah. And also, anybody who is like somebody who just like straightforward mystery crimes that it's focused on the mystery may not enjoy this because it doesn't just, it's not fully focused. Like, I would say, like, for like the first third of this book is more about Anna's past and like her like going back and seeing her past. But then like towards like the last half of it, it does focus in on it. So it's like it's more about how her past trauma, like I said, affects this case and affects her healing journey as she's back in this hometown that is bringing up those memories in the first place. So I feel like it's less about the mystery and more about Anna's healing from her past trauma and tragedy. So, but I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars. I do think that there's issues with this, and I can definitely understand why others would not enjoy this because it's a little bit jarring with like how she doesn't really do a good job making sure that we understand where we are in time. And such, but I couldn't help it. I enjoyed it. I liked seeing Anna as a person and getting to know her personally as they investigated this missing person. So, as I said, 4 stars. Now on to what I am planning to read this coming week. I don't know if I mentioned this. I can't remember that far back, but I did start this week The Palace of Illusions. I think, yeah, it's a myth retelling. It's an Indian myth retelling about about this Princess Panchali, who is the wife of the legendary Pandavas brothers in the Mahabharata. So a lot of these myths are told through the perspective of the men. So this author decided to focus on the women's perspective and what her experience through this would have been like. So I read like 50 pages of this. It just really wasn't grabbing me. Like I have no, I'm going to finish this today. I'm determined to finish this today, but I don't really have any motivation. It's like one of the things where like there's nothing really negative about the book, but there's nothing really positive about it, and really nothing for me to feel motivated to pick it up. So like it's really what I find interesting is that this is at a time where men would have like multiple wives at one time, and then she ends up doing the same thing, but like she's having husbands, multiple husbands at one time. So I'm gonna be interested to see where this leads, but like I said, I just don't have the motivation to pick this up as much as I would like. Like I like the writing style. I find the protagonist interesting, but the story itself is just not something that I have found fully interesting yet to grab my attention. Like we haven't even really gotten to where she has married anyone yet. So I feel like once we get to that point, the story will start becoming a little bit more interesting, hopefully. So there's that. Then the next one I have is If I Had Your Face by Francis Shaw. This is set in Seoul, Korea, and I believe it's about these 4 women. You have Curie, who works at a Seoul room salon. It's like an exclusive underground bar where she entertains businessmen while they drink. And so we're seeing how she makes an impulsive mistake that threatens her livelihood. Then we have her roommate, Miho, who is a talented artist who grew up in an orphanage but won a scholarship to study art in New York. Returning to Korea after college, she finds herself in a precarious relationship with the heir to one of the country's biggest conglomerates. Then we also have Ara, who lives down the hall, a hairstylist whose 2 preoccupations sustains her: an obsession with a boy band pop star and a best friend who is saving up for the extreme plastic surgery that she hopes will change her life. And then lastly, we have Wana, who lives 1 floor below them, who is a newlywed trying to have a baby, though she and her husband have no idea how they can afford to raise it in Korea's brutal economy. So it's about each of their stories and how they each become friends with one another through living in this apartment building, I think. So I'm very much looking forward to this. It's a pretty short book, so I definitely could see myself reading this in one day. The last one is going to be probably the hardest book to finish for me because of how long it is, and that is We the Drowned by Karsten Jensen. And this one is like almost 700 pages. But this is a book I've been wanting to read for years, and I finally decided to pick it up. So I thought I better pick it up and start it now because it's due on the 26th. If I'm able to read like 300 pages a day, I should be able to finish this in like 3 days. But I'm not gonna hold my breath on that. Okay, I'm not gonna force myself to try. But this is said like right after. Well, actually, it says it's spanning over 100 years from the mid-19th century to the end of the Second World War. From the barren rocks of Newfoundland to the lush plantations of Samoa, from the roughest bars in Tasmania to the frozen coast of northern Russia, We the Drowned is a magnificent tale of love, war, and adventure of the men who go to sea and the women they leave behind. Ships are wrecked and blown up in wars. They are places of terror and violence, yet they continue to lure each generation of Marcellers. Among them are Lord Manson, who vanishes in the South Pacific, his son Albert, who searches the globe for his father, nude Eric, and his widowed mother Clara, who takes on the town and the seas. There are cannibals here, shrunken heads, prophetic dreams, forbidden passions, cowards, heroes, devastating tragedies, and miraculous survivals. Everything the town like Marcel has actually lived. Oh, okay. So it's more about the town really, and like the lives that this town affects, and such. So it's a lot more than what I was expecting. So I don't know. We'll see. Sometimes those kind of stories can be a hit or miss. It can be hard to enjoy because sometimes I really just like being focused in on like a certain amount of groups and just focus in on them. But I don't know. We're gonna at least try it. Anyways, that is everything that I have read this week. I would love to hear your thoughts on any of the things that I have read, plan to read, and I would love to also hear what you've been reading. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.